So Goldman Sachs reported second quarter earnings this morning. A rather flimsy 5.4% annual rate of return on equity. That's not what the kind of number that Goldman's used to. Anthony, what's going on with our friends at the Squid?
Well, the biggest issue they've got, obviously, is what everyone else has got, which is business has slowed down. In fact, if you look at the three banks...
Trading equity issuance, all those.
Exactly. And if you look at the trading revenues in fixed income, it's rather amazing to find out that the three who've reported so far have drops in the 30 to 35%
so all three
range.
banks similar.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So everyone's suffering, and we know this. The problem is that you look at Goldman Sachs and you see this awful return on equity, even though they actually bought back a large number of shares for them, considering what they've done the last few years, but still relatively small. The Fed, of course, gives them the approval to do that. So there's only so much they can buy back. Of course, if you buy back some, then your return on equity goes up a bit. But
but the problem with a low return on equity is that there's this kind of balance they're trying to strike, right? Between pay on the one hand and what's left over for shareholders on the other. Now, now, that's a flimsy, small amount left over for shareholders.
Yeah, I mean, they talked on the call about trying to cut more non-comp expenses out. There may be $500 million of the year, which will help, but they're not budging at all on pay. It's at 44% of revenue, and was last quarter as well.
And we should be clear, that's a set-aside
until
the last quarter.
That's everything.
Then they tend to adjust a bit.
Exactly, so it covers everything. It's not just what people have got last quarter, it's compensation, benefits, bonus, set aside for bonuses. And they will often rejig that in the fourth quarter. So let's assume, I think last year it was somewhere in the region of 42%. But that's still higher than a lot of the others. You can't do apples to apples, but if you look at JP Morgan's investment bank alone, obviously Goldman isn't just an investment banking operation, theirs is around 35%. Now, if you applied that to Goldman, you boost the return to shareholders this quarter by 18%. So you're going up to 6.5% return on equity. It's not a lot.
Still not great, but some shareholders would say, well, that's a fairer balance.
Exactly.
Because, you know, in the old days, Goldman would get a stellar return on equity and very high pay, and people are kind of okay with that. But if it's not a stellar return on equity, you've got a problem.
Whereas now, obviously, Goldman and a lot of others have got a lot more equity because of the financial crisis. They need to be much less leveraged. And Goldman's doing a few other things to try and keep investors on side as well. So, all right, they've got dividends out there still fine, but that hasn't changed a great deal. They didn't cut them in as much in the crisis as others did. And they have said, look, actually their value at risk, which is not a great number at looking at what risk you're taking, but it's the lowest Goldman's had since 2006. So, look, we're not wasting your money. We're not going after stuff that's going to get us in real trouble. And we're keeping it nice and low. Of course, we're assuming they're not doing what JP Morgan's done and kind of played around with their FAR numbers. So it's pretty tricky for them. Now, if you look over the first half of the year, it looks a bit better. If you cut pay to around 40%, then they might just be getting into sort of beating the cost of capital around 10 or 11% just. So they need to cut pay, I think, because it just looks too high compared to peers. But even then, unless business picks up, they're looking at best beating their cost, just about beating their cost of capital, which is for Goldman is not brilliant.
Right, we'll leave it there. Goldman's obviously going to need all the expertise it has in-house to make that balancing act work. And we'll have more breaking views tomorrow.